I never thought a letter from my insurance company would make my blood run cold, but there I was, standing in my kitchen in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, holding a cancellation notice that accused me of filing fraudulent claims and maintaining a hazardous property. My name is Zachary Voss, and I had never filed a single insurance claim in the 15 years I had owned homes. Not one. Yet according to this letter, my homeowner's insurance was being dropped effective in 30 days due to multiple violations and suspicious activity patterns. My hands shook as I read through the details. The letter mentioned 3 separate incidents over the past 6 months: water damage from neglected roof maintenance, fire hazard violations involving improper storage of flammable materials, and structural damage from unauthorized modifications to load-bearing walls. None of it was true. I had meticulously maintained my 2-story home in the Sonoran Vista community since I moved in 3 years ago. My roof was inspected annually. I worked as an accountant from my home office and kept nothing more dangerous than printer paper in my garage, and I certainly had not knocked down any walls. I immediately called my insurance agent, Marcus Chen, who had been handling my policies for over a decade. He sounded genuinely confused when I explained the situation. "Zachary, I'm looking at your file right now. There are claim reports here that I did not file. Someone submitted documentation to the insurance company directly, bypassing our office entirely. This is highly irregular." "What kind of documentation?" I asked, pacing across my kitchen floor. "Photos, incident reports, and what appears to be official inspection documents. Let me pull up the images." There was a pause, then Marcus made a sound of disbelief. "These photos are not even of your property. The house in these pictures has different colored siding and a completely different landscape. Zachary, someone fabricated these claims." My mind raced through possibilities. Who would do this? Who had access to my policy information? Then it hit me like a sledgehammer. The HOA. 3 months ago, I had gotten into a dispute with Patricia Melendez, the president of our Homeowners Association, over my front yard landscaping. I had replaced my water-hungry grass with drought-resistant native plants and decorative gravel, which was not only environmentally responsible in Arizona, but also encouraged by the city. Patricia had sent me violation notices claiming my xeriscape design violated the community's aesthetic standards, even though the HOA covenant specifically allowed water conservation landscaping. "Marcus, I think my HOA president might be behind this. We have been in a dispute over my yard." "That is a serious accusation. If true, this would constitute insurance fraud, which is a felony in Arizona. Let me dig deeper into where these claims originated. I will call you back within the hour." I hung up and immediately walked outside to examine my property. Everything looked exactly as it should. My desert willow tree was thriving, the purple sage was blooming beautifully, and the red yucca plants added perfect pops of color against the tan gravel. My neighbor, Tom Richardson, was watering his plants next door and waved at me. "Hey, Zachary, you get one of those nasty letters from Patricia too?" he called out. I walked over to the fence line. "What letters?" "She sent violation notices to half the street yesterday. Apparently my porch furniture is the wrong shade of beige." He rolled his eyes. "That woman has been on a power trip ever since she became HOA president. Did you hear what she did to the Hendersons on Cactus Court?" "No, what happened?" "She filed a lien against their property over a $200 fine for leaving their trash cans visible from the street. They were on vacation and did not get the notice in time. Now they are dealing with lawyers just to refinance their mortgage. It is completely insane." A chill ran down my spine. If Patricia was willing to file liens over trash cans, would she escalate to insurance fraud over landscaping? It seemed extreme, but the more I thought about her behavior over the past few months, the more plausible it became. She had been relentless in her campaign against my yard, sending weekly violation notices even after I provided documentation that my landscaping was compliant. She had even stood at the end of my driveway one morning, taking photos of my house with her phone while I was leaving for the grocery store. My phone rang. Marcus was calling back sooner than expected. "Zachary, you need to hear this. I contacted the insurance company's fraud investigation unit and spoke with a supervisor. They were able to trace the IP address from where these claims were submitted. It came from a library computer in Scottsdale, But here's where it gets interesting. The email address used to submit the claims was registered under the name of your HOA. It was hoa.sonoranvista at one of those free email services. Can they prove Patricia submitted them? Not directly yet, but I pulled the metadata from the photos attached to the false claims. The images were taken with an iPhone and still had location data embedded. Want to guess what address they were taken at? Tell me. 4216 West Saguaro Drive. That is 3 streets over from you, and according to property records, that house was foreclosed on 8 months ago. It has been sitting vacant. Someone photographed that abandoned property and claimed the damage was at your address. My jaw clenched. Patricia has access to all the homeowner information in the community. She knows my insurance company because I had to provide proof of insurance to the HOA when I closed on the house. Exactly. Zachary, this is textbook insurance fraud. With your permission, I want to bring this to both the insurance company's investigative team and potentially law enforcement. This woman tried to have your insurance canceled with fabricated evidence. That is a Class 4 felony in Arizona. Do it. I want this documented and investigated properly. I am not going to let her destroy my insurance history and potentially my ability to get coverage in the future. Marcus promised to start the formal process immediately. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering my own documentation, photos of my property with timestamps, my landscaping permit from the city showing approval for xeriscaping, inspection reports from the roofing company, and every single violation notice Patricia had sent me over the past 3 months. I organized everything into a folder on my computer and backed it up to cloud storage. That evening, I received an email from the HOA. It was from Patricia, sent to all residents in Sonoran Vista. The subject line read, "Important Community Standards Reminder." I opened it with a sense of dread. The email was a lengthy diatribe about maintaining property values and respecting the community's established aesthetic. But the final paragraph made my blood boil. Please be aware that the HOA board takes violations seriously and has the authority to report non-compliant properties to relevant authorities, including insurance companies, to ensure community standards are maintained. She was not even hiding it. This was practically a confession that she was interfering with homeowners' insurance. I screenshot the email and forwarded it to Marcus immediately. The next morning, I received a call from an investigator with the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. Her name was Detective Sarah Ortiz, and she explained that Marcus had filed a formal fraud complaint on my behalf. Mr. Voss, I have reviewed the preliminary information your insurance agent provided. This appears to be a clear case of insurance fraud with intent to cause financial harm. I would like to set up a meeting with you to go over the timeline and collect any evidence you have regarding Patricia Melendez's actions. We scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix. I arrived early, my folder of documents in hand, and ordered a black coffee that I barely touched. Detective Ortiz was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She shook my hand firmly, and we sat in a corner booth away from other customers. "Walk me through everything from the beginning," she said, pulling out a digital recorder. "Start with when you first had issues with the HOA. I explained the entire situation, my decision to install drought-resistant landscaping, Patricia's immediate opposition despite the HOA covenants allowing it, the escalating violation notices, and her increasingly aggressive behavior. I showed Detective Ortiz the emails, the violation letters, and the photos I had taken of Patricia photographing my property. She stood in front of your house taking pictures? Multiple times. At first I thought she was just documenting what she considered violations for HOA records, but now I realize she was probably gathering information to use against me in other ways. Detective Ortiz made notes on her tablet. The insurance company provided us with the fraudulent claim submissions. The email address used was hoa.sonoranvista at a free email provider. We subpoenaed the account creation records. The account was created on March 15th of this year using the name Patricia Melendez, though with a different phone number than her actual number. However, the IP address used to create the account and send the claims matches the IP address of the Sonoran Vista HOA office, which is located in the community clubhouse. Can you prove she was the one who accessed the computer? That is where we need more evidence. The clubhouse is accessible to all board members, so theoretically, any of them could have used that computer. However, combined with the pattern of harassment you have documented and the fact that the fraudulent email specifically targeted you after your dispute with her, we have a strong circumstantial case. I want to interview other homeowners in your community. Your neighbor mentioned that Patricia has been aggressive with other residents as well. I told her about Tom Richardson and the Hendersons and mentioned that several other neighbors had complained about Patricia's heavy-handed approach to HOA enforcement. Detective Ortiz said she would reach out to them. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Ortiz discovered that Patricia had not just targeted me. She had filed similar fraudulent insurance claims against 2 other homeowners in Sonoran Vista who had disputed her authority. One was an elderly woman named Helen Kowalski who had installed a wheelchair ramp without HOA approval because she needed it for medical reasons. Patricia had submitted claims to Helen's insurance company alleging the ramp was structurally unsound and posed a liability risk, despite the ramp being professionally installed and permitted by the city. The other victim was a young couple, David and Jenny Martinez, who had painted their front door a shade of blue that Patricia claimed violated the approved color palette. She had submitted fraudulent claims alleging they had caused paint damage to neighboring properties, complete with photos of a completely different house that had paint splatters on the driveway. All 3 fraudulent claim submissions had come from the same email address and the same IP address at the HOA clubhouse. The pattern was undeniable. Marcus called me with an update on the insurance front. The insurance company has reinstated your policy and cleared your record completely. They are treating you as a victim of fraud, and they are cooperating fully with the criminal investigation. They are also pursuing a civil lawsuit against Patricia Melendez for the costs associated with investigating the fraudulent claims. That is a relief. I was worried this would follow me even after it was proven false. Insurance fraud is taken very seriously. Companies do not want to set a precedent that HOA members can weaponize the insurance system. This could have implications for the entire industry if left unchecked. In early June, Detective Ortiz contacted me again. We have enough evidence to move forward with criminal charges. The district attorney is filing charges against Patricia Melendez for 3 counts of insurance fraud, each a Class 4 felony, and 3 counts of forgery for creating false inspection documents. We are executing a search warrant on her home and the HOA office tomorrow morning. I wanted to give you a heads up. The next day, I watched from my kitchen window as several unmarked police vehicles parked in front of Patricia's house, which was just 2 blocks from mine. Officers in plain clothes approached her door, and within minutes, Patricia was being led out in handcuffs. Even from a distance, I could see her face was bright red, and she appeared to be yelling at the officers. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from neighbors. Tom sent me a message that simply said, "Did you see? They arrested Patricia." The HOA office was also searched, and police removed several boxes of documents and the desktop computer from the clubhouse. The local news picked up the story that evening. A reporter stood outside the Sonoran Vista entrance sign and announced that an HOA president had been arrested for allegedly filing fraudulent insurance claims against multiple homeowners in her community. My phone rang. It was a reporter from the Arizona Republic asking if I would be willing to be interviewed about my experience. I declined, not wanting to make myself a public figure in the story, but I did provide a brief statement through Detective Ortiz confirming that I was one of the victims and cooperating with the investigation. Patricia was released on bond the following day, but the damage to her reputation was catastrophic. An emergency HOA board meeting was called, and she was unanimously voted out as president. Several homeowners, including myself, attended the meeting to ensure it happened. Patricia showed up looking disheveled and angry and tried to defend herself. "Zuz, this is a complete misunderstanding. I was only trying to maintain our property values. These people were violating our covenants, and I had every right to report them." One of the other board members, Gerald Foster, cut her off. "Patricia, you filed false insurance claims. That is not enforcing covenants. That is fraud. You have exposed this entire HOA to liability. We have already been contacted by attorneys representing the victims. You need to resign immediately, or we will proceed with a formal removal vote. You cannot do this to me. I have dedicated 3 years to this community, Patricia shouted, her voice cracking. You committed crimes against members of this community, another board member said quietly. Please leave. Patricia stormed out, slamming the clubhouse door behind her. The board then voted to hire an attorney to review all of Patricia's actions as president to ensure there were no other improprieties. They also voted to send a formal apology letter to me, Helen, and the Martinez family, along with an offer to cover any legal expenses we had incurred as a result of Patricia's actions. The criminal case moved forward through the summer. Patricia hired a defense attorney who tried to argue that she had genuinely believed the properties were in violation and had made an honest mistake in her reporting. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The photos she submitted were provably of different properties. The inspection documents she had forged bore the signatures of city inspectors who testified they had never inspected any of our homes and had never signed such documents. The metadata from the photos proved they were taken at the abandoned foreclosure property, not at our addresses. In late August, facing the mountain of evidence against her, Patricia accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts of insurance fraud and 1 count of forgery. The other charges were dropped as part of the agreement. At her sentencing hearing in September, I was asked if I wanted to provide a victim impact statement. I decided to attend. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with simple wooden benches and harsh fluorescent lighting. Patricia sat at the defense table with her attorney, looking smaller somehow than she had during her time terrorizing the neighborhood. She wore a conservative gray suit and kept her eyes down. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium and addressed the judge. Your Honor, Patricia Melendez tried to destroy my financial security over a disagreement about plants in my yard. She did not just send me violation notices or fine me through proper HOA channels. She deliberately fabricated evidence and submitted it to my insurance company with the intent to have my coverage canceled. She knew that losing homeowners insurance could have devastating consequences. It could have prevented me from refinancing my mortgage, made it nearly impossible to obtain new coverage, and severely damaged my creditworthiness. She did this not just to me, but to 2 other innocent homeowners who simply wanted to live peacefully in their homes. She abused her position of authority in our community to wage a personal vendetta. This was not a mistake. This was calculated, malicious, and wrong. I ask that the court impose a sentence that reflects the seriousness of her crimes and deters others from weaponizing systems like insurance against people they disagree with. I returned to my seat. Helen Kowalski, the elderly woman with the wheelchair ramp, also provided a statement. Her hands trembled as she spoke. I installed that ramp because I can no longer safely use stairs after my hip surgery. I followed every building code and got proper permits. When my insurance company contacted me about structural concerns, I was terrified. I'm on a fixed income. I cannot afford legal battles or higher insurance premiums. What Patricia did was cruel. She targeted a disabled senior citizen over something that was medically necessary. I have lived in Sonoran Vista for 20 years and loved my home, but her actions made me feel unsafe in my own community. The Martinez family also spoke, with Jenny Martinez explaining how the stress of the fraudulent claims had affected their young children and caused them to consider selling their home and moving, despite loving the neighborhood. Patricia's attorney argued for probation, claiming she had no prior criminal record and had already suffered significant consequences through public humiliation and removal from the HOA board. The prosecutor countered that the calculated nature of the crimes and the multiple victims warranted incarceration. The judge, a stern-looking man named Judge Thomas Reynolds, reviewed the case document silently for several minutes before speaking. Miss Melendez, you held a position of trust in your community. Homeowner associations exist to maintain standards and resolve disputes through proper channels. Instead, you used your position to gather personal information about homeowners and weaponize it against them. You created false evidence, forged documents, and attempted to manipulate the insurance system to cause financial harm to people whose only offense was disagreeing with you. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a sustained campaign of fraud spanning several months against multiple victims. While I acknowledge you have no prior record, the severity and premeditation of these crimes cannot be overlooked. He sentenced Patricia to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to all 3 victims for legal expenses and damages, and to pay fines to the state for the insurance fraud violations. Patricia's face crumpled as the sentence was read, and she began crying. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had not wanted to see Patricia's life destroyed, but she had made choices that hurt people, and there had to be consequences. The civil lawsuit filed by my insurance company against Patricia proceeded separately. Marcus explained that the insurer was seeking to recover the costs of their fraud investigation, which had involved dozens of staff hours and resources. Since Patricia had already been criminally convicted, the civil case was straightforward. The judge ruled in favor of the insurance company and ordered Patricia to pay an additional $45,000 in damages. Between the criminal restitution, the civil judgment, and her legal fees, Patricia faced financial ruin. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had been forced to sell her house in Sonoran Vista to pay her debts. Part of me felt sympathy. 18 months in jail and complete financial collapse was a harsh outcome, but I reminded myself that she had tried to do the same to me and others. She had shown no mercy when she fabricated evidence that could have destroyed our lives. The aftermath of Patricia's crimes had ripple effects throughout the Sonoran Vista community. The HOA board implemented new oversight procedures to prevent any single board member from having unchecked authority. They required all violation notices to be reviewed and approved by at least 2 board members before being sent. They also established a formal appeals process for homeowners who disagreed with HOA decisions, complete with mediation options. The new HOA president was a retired teacher named Michael Romano, who had a much more reasonable approach to community management. One of his first acts was to formally approve xeriscaping and other water conservation landscaping methods, encouraging residents to reduce their water usage in accordance with Arizona's ongoing drought concerns. Helen Kowalski's wheelchair ramp was officially approved and added to the HOA architectural guidelines as an example of appropriate medical accommodation. The Martinez family's blue door was also retroactively approved, and the approved color palette was expanded to give homeowners more flexibility. Tom Richardson started a neighborhood watch group that focused on actual safety concerns rather than aesthetic nitpicking. The community slowly began to heal from the division and fear that Patricia's authoritarian approach had created. For my part, I was just grateful to move on with my life. My insurance was secure, my record was clear, and my desert landscaping continued to thrive in the Arizona sun. The purple sage attracted hummingbirds, and I found peace in watching them dart among the flowers from my kitchen window. Marcus and I met for lunch in October to celebrate the resolution of the case. We sat on the patio of a Mexican restaurant in Tempe, enjoying the cooler fall weather. You know, Zachary, in 20 years of working as an insurance agent, I have never seen anything quite like this. HOA disputes are common, but to see someone escalate to criminal fraud is extraordinary. I still cannot quite believe it happened. If you had not caught the discrepancies in those photos, I might have lost my insurance and never known why. That is what bothered me most. The insurance company was ready to just cancel your policy based on those fraudulent reports. They did not do any independent verification until I pushed back. It makes you wonder how many other people have been victimized by schemes like this without anyone catching it. Has your company changed any procedures because of this? Marcus nodded. Actually, yes. They have implemented new verification protocols for third-party claim submissions. If someone other than the policyholder or their agent submits a claim or incident report, it now triggers an automatic secondary review with direct contact to the policyholder. They are also scrubbing metadata from submitted photos more carefully. Your case has become a training example in their fraud prevention program. That gave me some satisfaction. If Patricia's crimes led to better protections for other homeowners, then at least some good had come from the nightmare. As autumn turned to winter, I received a letter from Helen Kowalski inviting me to Thanksgiving dinner. She explained that she wanted to host a gathering for the 3 families who had been victimized by Patricia, along with some of the supportive neighbors like Tom Richardson, as a way of reclaiming the sense of community that had been damaged. I accepted, and on Thanksgiving evening, I walked down the street to Helen's beautifully maintained home. Her wheelchair ramp had decorative iron railings that actually enhanced the appearance of her entrance. The Martinez family was already there, along with Tom and several other neighbors I recognized from HOA meetings. Helen had prepared an impressive spread of traditional Thanksgiving dishes. As we sat around her dining room table, the conversation naturally turned to everything that had happened. "I wanted to host this dinner because I think it's important we do not let Patricia's actions define our community," Helen said, raising her glass of apple cider. "She tried to make us afraid, to make us feel unwelcome in our own homes. But we stood up for ourselves, we supported each other, and justice was served. I am grateful for all of you." We toasted, and Jenny Martinez added, "I was terrified when we first got the notice from our insurance company. I thought we were going to lose everything, but seeing everyone come together and support each other through the investigation showed me that most people are good. Patricia was one bad actor, but the rest of this community is wonderful." David Martinez agreed. "And the new HOA board has been fantastic. Michael actually listens to residents instead of dictating to them. It is like night and day." Tom Richardson laughed. "I saw Michael the other day, and he told me he is terrified of being seen as too strict because he does not want to end up on the evening news like Patricia. I told him he is doing great and to just keep using common sense." As the evening went on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, holiday plans, recommendations for local restaurants, and friendly debates about the best hiking trails in the Phoenix area. The shadow of Patricia's crime still lingered, but it was fading. The community was healing. I drove home that night feeling genuinely thankful. My house looked welcoming with the porch light glowing warmly. My desert landscaping was peaceful in the moonlight, the gravel pathways creating elegant lines through the native plants. This was my home, and I had fought to protect it. The following spring, I received notification that Patricia had been released early from jail for good behavior after serving 11 months of her sentence. She had moved to Tucson to live with family and was reportedly working at a retail job while on probation. I hoped she had learned something from the experience and would never abuse a position of authority again. The insurance industry publication that Marcus subscribed to ran a feature article about insurance fraud schemes involving HOAs and community associations. My case was prominently featured, though my name was kept confidential. The article highlighted how HOA board members often have access to sensitive homeowner information and how that access can be weaponized. It called for better oversight of HOA boards and stronger penalties for officials who abuse their positions. Several states began introducing legislation to add specific penalties for HOA officials who commit fraud against homeowners. Arizona passed a law in late 2026 that made it a separate offense for an HOA board member to misuse homeowner information for fraudulent purposes, carrying enhanced penalties beyond standard fraud charges. Advocates for the law referred to it as the HOA Accountability Act, and I was quietly proud that my ordeal had contributed to stronger protections for other homeowners. Life returned to normal. I continued my work as an accountant, focusing on small business clients who appreciated my attention to detail, the same attention to detail that had helped me document Patricia's harassment so thoroughly. My home remained my sanctuary, and I took pride in maintaining it properly, though I was now much more aware of the importance of documenting everything. I kept copies of all my maintenance records, inspection reports, and photographs of my property in organized files. I maintained correspondence with my insurance company and Marcus, making sure everything was transparent and documented. The experience had made me cautious but not paranoid. I simply understood now that protecting yourself requires diligence. The Sonoran Vista HOA continued to function much more smoothly under Michael Romano's leadership. Violation notices became rare and were only issued for genuinely problematic situations like major safety hazards. The community newsletter started featuring positive stories about residents, people who organized neighborhood cleanups, holiday decorating contests that were fun rather than mandatory, and profiles of interesting neighbors and their hobbies. One afternoon, in June, about a year and a half after Patricia's arrest, I was watering my front yard plants when a car pulled up. A woman I did not recognize got out and approached me cautiously. "Are you Zachary Voss?" she asked. I am. Can I help you?" "My name is Rebecca Sullivan. I'm a homeowner in a community in Gilbert, and I'm having issues with my HOA president. Someone gave me your name and said you dealt with a similar situation. I was hoping you might be willing to talk to me about what happened and how you handled it." I invited her to sit on my front porch, and she explained her situation. Her HOA president was threatening to fine her thousands of dollars over a play structure she had installed in her backyard for her children. The structure was not visible from the street and met all safety codes, but the president claimed it violated covenants that required architectural approval for any exterior structures. Bing. "The problem is," Rebecca said, "I did submit an architectural request, and it was approved by 2 board members. But the president says she never received it and claims I installed it without permission. Now she is threatening to put a lien on my house if I do not pay the fines and remove the play structure." "Do you have documentation of your architectural approval?" "Yes, I have the email approval from the 2 board members, but the president says only she has the authority to grant final approval, even though that is not what the covenants say. I recognized the pattern immediately, an HOA official overstepping their authority and threatening extreme consequences to bully a homeowner into compliance. "Here is what you need to do," I said. "First, gather every piece of documentation you have, your architectural submission, the email approvals, the HOA covenants showing what the actual approval process is, photos of your play structure, and any communications with the president. Second, contact an attorney who specializes in HOA law. Do not try to fight this alone. Third, file a formal complaint with your HOA board requesting a review of the president's actions. Make sure everything is in writing." Rebecca took notes on her phone as I spoke. "Did you have to sue your HOA president?" "Actually, my situation was different. The president in my case committed insurance fraud, which became a criminal matter. But the principle is the same: document everything, follow proper legal channels, and do not let them intimidate you into giving up your rights." We talked for another half hour. I shared Marcus's contact information so she could ask him about protecting her homeowner's insurance from potential retaliation. I also gave her Detective Ortiz's name at the Arizona Department of Insurance in case she suspected any insurance-related fraud. "Thank you so much," Rebecca said as she prepared to leave. "Everyone told me I should just take down the play structure and avoid the fight, but my kids love it, and I know I followed the rules. I was starting to think I was crazy for wanting to push back." "You are not crazy. HOA covenants exist to maintain reasonable standards, but they are not supposed to be tools for abuse. Stand up for yourself, but do it smartly with proper documentation and legal support." After Rebecca left, I reflected on how much had changed since that awful day when I first received the insurance cancellation notice. I had gone from victim to survivor to advocate. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, the importance of documentation, and the power of standing up against injustice. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Just got a call from Rebecca Sullivan. Thanks for helping her. I am reviewing her insurance policy to make sure she is protected. Her situation sounds concerning." I replied, "Let me know if there is anything I can do to help. Nobody should have to go through what I went through." As the sun set over the Sonoran Desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on my porch and appreciated the peace. My purple sage was in full bloom, attracting bees and butterflies. The desert willow tree rustled gently in the evening breeze. My home was exactly as I wanted it: environmentally responsible, beautiful in its own way, and truly mine. The ordeal with Patricia Melendez had tested me in ways I never anticipated. It had revealed how vulnerable homeowners can be to abuse by those in positions of authority within their communities. It had shown me the importance of having advocates like Marcus who are willing to dig deeper when something seems wrong. And it had demonstrated that the legal system, while slow, can ultimately deliver justice. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering if she understood the magnitude of what she had done. She had not just filed some paperwork or sent nasty emails. She had attempted to destroy the financial security of 3 families over petty disputes. She had fabricated evidence, forged documents, and manipulated systems designed to protect people. The fact that she did all of this while holding a position of community trust made it even worse. But dwelling on Patricia served no purpose. She had been held accountable, the community had moved forward, and I had emerged stronger and more informed. That night, I updated my property files, adding recent maintenance receipts and new photos. It had become a monthly routine, this documentation of normalcy. Some might call it excessive, but I called it prudent. The world had shown me that you cannot assume good faith from everyone, especially those who hold power over aspects of your life. I also started a blog sharing advice for homeowners dealing with HOA disputes. I kept it anonymous using a pseudonym, but I shared the lessons I had learned. The blog gained a modest following, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of people who had similar stories of HOA overreach and abuse. I connected readers with resources, attorneys specializing in HOA law, consumer protection agencies, insurance fraud hotlines, and advocacy groups working to reform HOA regulations. One reader wrote to me, "Your blog saved me from making a huge mistake. My HOA president was pressuring me to sign a settlement agreement over a violation, and I was ready to just sign it to make the problem go away. But after reading your advice about documentation and legal review, I showed it to an attorney first. Turns out the violation was not actually in our covenants at all, and the settlement would have waived my rights to challenge future actions. Thank you for sharing your experience." Messages like that made the effort worthwhile. If sharing my story prevented even one person from being victimized the way I had been, then some good had come from the nightmare. As months turned into another year, the story of Patricia Melendez faded from local news and became just another cautionary tale about HOA abuse. But for me, it remained a defining experience. It had changed how I viewed authority, how I interacted with institutions, and how seriously I took my rights as a homeowner. Michael Romano proved to be an excellent HOA president, and when his term ended, the community elected another reasonable person who continued the reformed approach to community management. Violation notices became rare. Disputes were resolved through conversation rather than threats. The community genuinely felt like a community again rather than a fiefdom. Helen Kowalski remained a dear friend. We had coffee together regularly, and she often joked that her wheelchair ramp had become the most famous architectural feature in Sonoran Vista. The Martinez family's daughter started a neighborhood kids club that met at the community pool on summer afternoons, and Jenny Martinez mentioned that their blue door had become something of a local landmark. Tom Richardson continued his neighborhood watch program, and crime in our community remained low. He credited the community spirit that had developed in the aftermath of Patricia's removal, saying that when neighbors actually knew and looked out for each other, it created a natural deterrent to crime. My desert landscaping became a model for other homeowners interested in water conservation. I gave informal consultations to several neighbors who wanted to transition from grass to xeriscaping, sharing my plant sources and design ideas. The community gradually became more environmentally conscious, with several streets now featuring beautiful arrays of native plants, decorative rock, and water-efficient irrigation. I never regretted the decision to fight back against Patricia's fraud. The path had been stressful and sometimes frightening, but it was the right choice. Allowing her actions to go unchallenged would have meant living with a fraudulent mark on my insurance record, paying higher premiums, or being unable to get coverage, and sending the message that HOA officials could act with impunity. Marcus retired from the insurance business in early 2028, and at his retirement party, he introduced me to his replacement, a sharp young woman named Lisa Chen, his niece, coincidentally who promised to maintain the same level of advocacy and attention to detail that Marcus had always provided. "Uncle Marcus told me all about your case," Lisa said when we met. "It is literally used as a teaching example in insurance fraud prevention courses now. You should be proud that your experience is helping protect other people. I am just glad it is over and that something positive came from it. Well, if you ever have any issues, even minor ones, please call me immediately. After what you went through, I want to make sure you never have to deal with anything like that again. Having that kind of support from my insurance team gave me peace of mind. The trauma of the experience had left some lingering anxiety about authority figures and institutional processes, but knowing I had advocates in my corner helped tremendously. In the summer of 2028, almost 3 years after Patricia's arrest, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Patricia herself, forwarded through the county probation office. My first instinct was to throw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten on plain notebook paper. Dear Zachary, I know you probably do not want to hear from me, and I understand if you throw this letter away. I am writing because my therapist says I need to take accountability for what I did. I cannot undo the damage I caused you, Helen, and the Martinez family. What I did was wrong, criminal, and cruel. I was so focused on maintaining what I thought the community should look like that I lost all perspective on what actually matters. I made your lives hell over things that did not matter at all. Your plants were beautiful and environmentally responsible. Helen's ramp was medically necessary. The Martinez's door was just a color. None of it warranted what I did. I fabricated evidence, committed fraud, and tried to destroy your financial security. I deserve everything that happened to me as a consequence. I spent nearly a year in jail thinking about my actions. I lost my home, my reputation, and my place in the community I claimed to care about. I'm working a minimum wage job and will be paying off my debts for years. But honestly, the worst part is knowing that I hurt innocent people who were just trying to live their lives. I do not expect forgiveness, and I am not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong, and I am sorry. I hope you are doing well and that your home brings you joy. Patricia Melendez. I read the letter twice, processing my emotions. There was anger. How dare she reach out after everything she had put me through? There was skepticism. Was this genuine remorse or just something her therapist or probation officer made her do? But there was also a small measure of satisfaction. She had acknowledged her wrongdoing completely, without excuses or justifications. I did not respond to the letter. I did not owe her my forgiveness or my engagement, but I kept the letter in my file, a strange bookend to all the violation notices and threatening emails she had sent years ago. It was proof that accountability could lead to growth, even if the growth came too late to undo the damage. Life continued its steady rhythm. My accounting business thrived. My home remained my sanctuary. The Sonoran Vista community continued to be a pleasant place to live, with none of the fear and tension that had characterized Patricia's tenure. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious developed. My experience with Patricia had made me cautious about trusting people, but I was working on not letting her crimes poison my ability to connect with others. My therapist, whom I started seeing after the trial, helped me process the trauma and reminded me that one person's bad actions did not define all of humanity. In the fall of 2028, I was contacted by a documentary producer who was making a film about HOA abuse and reform efforts. They wanted to interview me about my experience. I initially declined, still preferring to keep my story private, but after thinking about it for a few days, I reconsidered. If sharing my experience on a larger platform could help push for legal reforms and warn other homeowners about potential abuses, perhaps it was worth the discomfort. I agreed to participate with the conditions that my face would be obscured and my voice altered to protect my privacy. The interview took place in my home, with my beautiful desert landscaping visible through the windows behind me, a subtle visual reminder of what had started the entire conflict. The interviewer asked thoughtful questions about the timeline of events, how I discovered the fraud, and what the experience had taught me. I emphasized the importance of documentation, the value of having advocates like Marcus who are willing to investigate discrepancies, and the need for stronger oversight of HOA boards. What would you say to other homeowners who are facing HOA disputes? The interviewer asked. I would tell them to know their rights. Read your HOA covenants thoroughly, actually read them. Do not just assume what they say. Document everything in writing. If someone makes a claim against you, verify it independently. And most importantly, do not be afraid to push back when you are right. HOA boards have authority, but that authority is not unlimited. They cannot violate laws or your rights just because they hold a position in the community. Stand up for yourself, but do it smartly with proper legal and professional support. The documentary aired on a streaming platform in early 2029 and generated significant discussion about HOA reform. Several states introduced new legislation to increase transparency requirements for HOA boards and establish easier processes for homeowners to challenge improper actions. I watched the documentary from my couch, seeing my story presented alongside others who had faced foreclosure, harassment, and financial ruin at the hands of overreaching HOA boards. The scope of the problem was bigger than I had realized. Tens of thousands of homeowners across the country dealt with HOA abuse every year, and many lacked the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. The documentary ended with a call to action: support HOA reform legislation, know your rights as a homeowner, and create community accountability systems that prevent any single person from wielding unchecked power. It was a message I fully supported. As I turned off the television that night, I looked around my home, the home I had fought so hard to protect. Every detail reflected my choices and my values. The artwork on the walls, the comfortable furniture, the organized home office where I ran my business, and the view through the windows of my thriving desert garden. This was mine, and I had proven that I could defend it. The experience with Patricia Melendez had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also revealed my own strength and resilience. I had faced fraud, potential financial ruin, and institutional intimidation, and I had prevailed. Not through aggression or retaliation, but through documentation, persistence, and working within the legal system. Years from now, when I looked back on this chapter of my life, I would remember not just the fear and stress, but also the moment when I stood in that courtroom and spoke my truth. I would remember Detective Ortiz's determination to pursue justice. I would remember Marcus's refusal to let the fraudulent claims go unchallenged. I would remember my neighbors coming together to support each other and demand accountability. Most of all, I would remember that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult and frightening, is always worth it. Patricia Melendez had tried to use her authority to destroy me over desert plants and gravel. Instead, she destroyed herself and became a cautionary tale about the consequences of abusing power. My purple sage continued to bloom, the hummingbirds continued to visit, and my home remained exactly as it should be, a place of peace, beauty, and hard-won security. The HOA could never take that away from me again.